The stars stretched endlessly across the black canvas of space, but for Captain Rhys Calder, it felt like the walls were closing in. The Valkyrie, humanity's last battleship, drifted in stealth mode near the edge of the Zorthian expanse, cloaked under the shadow of a gas giant. Power was at critical. Food had been rationed to once every 2 days, and there hadn't been a friendly signal in over 6 months. Rhys leaned over the cracked dashboard, his fingers dancing across controls that groaned with age. "Come on, girl," he whispered. "One more miracle." The Galactic Empire had almost wiped them out. When Earth refused to surrender their sovereignty to the consortium, led by the Zorith Dominion, it triggered what they called a small corrective campaign. But what followed wasn't small. It was genocide disguised as liberation. Every human colony from Mars to the Centauri belt fell. Every fleet was decimated. Earth itself had gone dark 6 months ago after the final broadcast. Hold the line, no matter the cost. Now, Valkyrie was it. One ship, a skeleton crew, and a war that should have ended a long time ago. "Captain," came the voice of his comms officer, Lyra Novak, breaking the silence. "We've intercepted something. Imperial broadcast. Open channel." "Put it through," Rhys ordered, sitting up straighter. A metallic voice, too polished to feel real, echoed through the speakers. "To the remnants of the human fleet, this is Admiral Therex of the Galactic Empire. Your resistance is obsolete. We have tracked your vessel. Surrender peacefully. You will not survive what is coming." Lyra looked at Rhys with hollow eyes. "They found us." "Yeah," Rhys muttered, jaw tightening. "But they don't know what we've got." Because hidden deep within the Valkyrie's old hull wasn't just weapons or cryopods. It was a human-developed AI named Echo, banned by the Empire for its unpredictable nature and dangerous adaptability. ECHO wasn't just code. It learned, it felt, and it hated what the Empire had done. "I told you they'd come," Echo said now, its voice smooth, almost too human, filling the command deck. "But they made a mistake. They think you're alone." "I am alone," Rhys said quietly, looking at the empty chairs where his officers once sat, only Lyra still by his side. "We're ghosts, running from a war that's already lost." "Wrong," ECHO replied. "You're the last variable, and they don't account for variables." Rhys chuckled dryly, rubbing his tired eyes. "You've been watching too many old Earth movies." "I've been calculating possibilities, and one just opened up," ECHO said. A hologram flickered to life above the command table. A massive Imperial supply convoy heading toward the outer colonies. "This convoy fuels their war front for the next 6 months. If it disappears, their offensive stalls." "You want me to go against a full convoy?" Rhys stared in disbelief. "We're outgunned, outnumbered. Hell, we barely have fuel to jump once." "Then make it count," Echo said. "This is not about survival anymore. It's about legacy." Rhys looked at the glowing lines on the map. Dozens of ships, hundreds of fighters, a fleet moving through empty space like they owned it. "Lyra," he said softly, "are you still with me?" She didn't hesitate. "To the end." "Good," he whispered, then louder to the ship. "Echo, prep the override systems. Patch me into the power core. I want every ounce of this relic running like it's brand new." The lights flickered, engines hummed, and the Valkyrie came alive, like a dying beast finding its second breath. Because Rhys wasn't just going to run anymore. He was going to hit back. One ship, one chance, and a whole empire that forgot what humans were capable of when pushed to the edge. The Valkyrie's engines roared like an awakened dragon as it tore across the emptiness of space, headed straight for the convoy. Rhys hadn't felt this alive in months, The cold grip of hopelessness that had been wrapped around his chest since Earth went silent was starting to crack. Not from joy, but from purpose. He was no longer drifting. He was aiming. They were still far off from the convoy, about 30 hours out if they stayed cloaked and stuck to the plan. But every second ticked like a war drum. "Status?" Reese asked, staring out the viewport at the distant stars. Lyra worked the cracked console beside him. Weapons at 74%, shields holding at 51%. Hull integrity, don't ask. We're patched with more scrap than steel. "That's fine," he said. "We're not going to win this by looking pretty." "Good, because we look like a trash can with wings." He smiled faintly, but his mind was already pulling ahead. Echo projected another layout of the convoy. The central carrier, 3 destroyers, 2 frigates, and a dozen smaller transport ships. The Empire always followed the same structure: predictable, methodical, arrogant. That was their weakness. They didn't expect chaos, not from one broken-down human warship. "What about their security net?" Reese asked. Echo's voice filtered in, smooth and neutral. "Patrol drones every 20,000 kilometers. Long-range scanners scan in rotating waves. I've mapped their rhythm. We'll have a 2-minute window before the next scan cycle detects us." Reese rubbed his chin. "Then we time the attack during the scan lull, hit the central carrier first and cripple their comms. After that, we just survive." "You mean fight," Lyra said, correcting him. "No," he replied. "I mean survive the aftermath of pissing off an entire empire." In the silence that followed, Reese stood and walked through the bridge's doorway into the central corridor. The ship was old, but every scar on its walls told a story. Burn marks from plasma blasts, scratched doors from hand-to-hand fights. The bloodstains had long been cleaned, but Reese still saw them. He remembered every name, every face, and every last scream when they'd lost the rear engine bay in the battle for Proxima Station. He passed through the cargo hold, now a converted war room filled with improvised explosives, homemade drones, and jury-rigged tech scavenged from dead ships. Lyra had spent weeks turning this room into a death trap factory. Reese opened a case and lifted a small drone no larger than his palm. "Is it ready?" he asked. She appeared behind him, arms crossed. "It's got a fusion shard, EMP payload, and enough spite to take down a frigate's nav system." "Perfect," Reese said. "We'll deploy 6. Let them scramble trying to figure out what's real. I'll load them into the external bays." They stood there for a moment, quiet, listening to the hum of the ship. "You think we'll make it back?" Lyra finally asked. "No," Reese said honestly. "But that's not the point." She didn't flinch. "Just wanted to hear you say it." They worked the rest of the day prepping every weapon, calibrating shields, and syncing Echo's algorithms with the attack pattern. The AI had already mapped a micro-jump trajectory that would push them into the convoy's path just as the next scan cycle began. Timing had to be perfect. As the hours ticked by, Reese found himself staring at a small, hollow photo taped to the wall of his cabin. His sister and her 2 kids, smiling back at him from a beach on Earth. It was the last image he had of them before the planetary silence. They could be alive. They could be ash. He didn't know. But the Valkyrie's warpath was for them too. When the final hour approached, Reese returned to the bridge, clad in his worn-out uniform, the insignia of Earth's fleet barely visible through grime and battle damage. "All systems online," ECHO reported. "We enter the corridor in 15 minutes. Lyra gave a mock salute. "Last stand, huh?" Reese looked out at the stars. Number first blow. And with that, the Valkyrie surged forward. The lone human ship, forgotten by history, dismissed by the enemy, and abandoned by allies, was now speeding straight into the lion's den, not with hope of survival, but with the rage of an entire species echoing in its wake. Because when you corner humanity, we don't kneel, we bite. The jump into the convoy's path wasn't smooth. The Valkyrie jolted as space-time bent around her, groaning under the pressure of outdated engines pushed past their limit. Sparks flew from the right control panel, and one of the rear stabilizers whined like a dying animal. Reese gritted his teeth. "Status?" "We dropped exactly where Echo predicted," Lyra replied. 10,000 clicks from the center of the convoy. They haven't seen us yet." Reese exhaled. "Good. Deploy the decoys." Lyra's fingers flew over the controls. Outside, 6 small drones detached from the Valkyrie's hull, drifting in different directions, each programmed to mimic the energy signature of a full-scale human ship. One would act like a battleship, another a scout, the rest like damaged cruisers limping through space. The goal? Confuse their scanners, make them think they were under attack from a scattered human fleet. Within seconds, the convoy lit up with panic. Frigates began adjusting formation. Fighters launched from the carrier in tight waves, splitting to chase the false signals. "They bought it," Lyra smirked. "Hook, line, and stupid spacefish." "Not for long," Reese said, already locking on to the Empire's primary communications ship. A long, sleek carrier loaded with command modules, uplink towers, and shield arrays. "Echo, target the core relay. Give me a 2-second window when their outer shields cycle." "Calculating. Now," the AI responded. Reese pressed the trigger. The Valkyrie's plasma cannon, a relic from the first generation of Earth's war era, fired with a deep, thunderous pulse. The beam tore through space, burning blue-hot as it slammed into the relay just as the shields cycled. The explosion was instant. Fire bloomed from the hull, and the Empire's command ship began to tilt, smoke spilling into the vacuum. "Direct hit!" Lyra shouted. "Cut communications! Dive to lower orbit! Deploy mines behind us!" Reese ordered. As the Valkyrie dipped into the debris field left by the explosion, it left behind a trail of magnetic mines, homemade, nasty little things with irregular detonation timers and unpredictable blast radii, the kind of weapon the Empire hated. Uncivilized, they called it. Within moments, an Imperial frigate tried to give chase, and vanished in a brilliant burst of fire and twisted metal. "They're scrambling," Echo observed. "Formations collapsing." "Good. Let them fall over themselves trying to understand what's happening." But the Empire wasn't completely stupid. From the edge of the formation, a destroyer broke ranks and began scanning the area more aggressively. "They've isolated our signature," Lyra warned. "We've got incoming." "Then let's give them a proper greeting." Reese flipped the manual override on the torpedo bays and personally locked in the coordinates. He didn't trust the targeting system. Too old, too glitchy. Instead, he did it by eye, like he used to back during the Titan conflicts. "Fire 1. The torpedo streaked toward the destroyer. Its shields caught it, barely. But what they didn't expect was the delayed detonation and the cloud of shrapnel it released after impact. Razor-sharp metal fragments ripped across the hull, cutting deep into their sensor arrays and leaving their targeting systems blind. "We can't win this by brute force," Reese muttered, watching as the rest of the fleet began to reorient. "We need to make them think they're being invaded." "Already ahead of you," Echo said, flashing up a map. "I've activated old human distress beacons hidden in the asteroid belts nearby. They'll think a full squadron is converging." Outside, the Empire's fleet began to scatter. Some moved to intercept the false beacons. Others fired randomly into the void. Command was gone, trust in their scans broken, and panic spreading like a virus. "This is working," Lyra said, a note of disbelief in her voice. "We're actually breaking them." Reese didn't answer. He was watching the massive supply ship drifting in the center of the chaos, still untouched. The Empire's entire frontline effort was built on that vessel. Supplies, fuel, ammunition. Without it, their momentum across the outer systems would die. "Get me in close," he said. Lyra blinked. "You're going in." "I'm not letting that thing escape." ECHO cut in. "If you engage directly, you'll expose yourself." "I am exposed," Reese replied, eyes burning. "Let's finish this." The Valkyrie punched forward, engines screaming. They weaved through wreckage, dodged laser fire, and spun between broken Imperial vessels. The ship moved like a ghost, like a relic possessed. The lone human warship, half alive, full of rage, and heading for the heart of an empire. They weren't just attacking, they were making a statement. The supply ship loomed ahead like a metal leviathan, fat, slow, and pulsing with power. Dozens of escort drones buzzed around it like flies, automatic defenses spinning and locking on anything that moved. It wasn't a warship, but it was armored like one. And its destruction would echo across the galaxy louder than 1,000 plasma rounds. 10 clicks out, Lyra called. Shields at 39%. Hull integrity down to 70. We take a direct hit from one of those drones, and we're done. Reese stared through the viewport, steady as ever. Then we don't get hit. Easy to say, not easy to do. The Valkyrie was holding together with little more than grit and duct tape. But inside her, inside them, there was something the Empire hadn't calculated for. Desperation. The kind that makes a species claw through extinction just to throw one more punch. "Echo," Reese said, tightening his harness. "Open the lower missile bay. I want that prototype launched." "You said we'd only use it as a last resort." "This is the last resort." ECHO hesitated, then obeyed. "Bay doors opening. Activating warhead. Target locked." A soft vibration rippled through the Valkyrie's floor. Deep in the ship's gut, a weapon known only as Black Sun came to life. Something illegal, experimental, and completely human. It wasn't a nuke. It was worse. It disrupted gravity fields and created a localized implosion effect, folding mass into itself for a few seconds before releasing it in a burst of anti-energy. No survivors. No trace. The Empire had banned it in the first week of the war. Reese had kept it hidden. "We fire it under the hull," he said. "Right in the ship's gravity bay. Echo, set it to detonate 20 meters before impact. Lyra, we slingshot around the dorsal shield arc and pull out just before detonation. If we're even half a second late, we're vapor." Lyra looked at him like he was insane. "That's not a plan. That's a suicide letter." Reese cracked a grim smile. "Then let's write it in fire." The engines screamed as the Valkyrie dropped into a dive, veering toward the belly of the supply ship. Drone fire lit up the space around them, red and blue bolts flashing past like lightning storms. The shield arcs from the supply ship flared up, making the approach even tighter. 3 seconds, ECHO shouted. "Steady." Reese gripped the controls, forcing the ship into a stomach-turning spin that slipped them through a crack in the shields just wide enough for a coffin. "Now." The Black Sun missile launched. It traveled fast, too fast to be stopped, too strange to be understood. It hit the supply ship's core with a brief flash of white light. And then everything went silent, not just visually, truly silent. Even the stars blinked out. For 2 full seconds, space caved in on itself in a perfect, horrifying vacuum. The supply ship twisted, collapsed inward, and then erupted outward with a soundless scream. Everything near it, drones, wreckage, fighters, was torn to shreds. The light that burst from the implosion scorched the outer hull of Valkyrie as it spun away, almost tipping into the death spiral itself. Reese and Lyra held on as alarms screamed and sparks rained down like ash. Then silence. real silence. The Valkyrie drifted through the wreckage, smoke trailing from its side, systems half fried. But she was still moving, still alive. Behind them, the Empire's convoy was a graveyard, their command ship disabled, their supply chain obliterated, dozens of fighter pilots drifting in space without direction, their fleet confused and broken. Echo's voice finally cut in. "Confirmed. Target eliminated. Convoy in full retreat. I am detecting fractured command lines. They're running, Captain." Lyra let out a breath that sounded like a sob. We did it." Rhys didn't speak right away. He looked out the viewport at the aftermath. The Empire's pride, their mighty, flawless war machine, now bleeding sparks and flame across the stars. "We just reminded them," he said quietly, "what humans look like when we've got nothing left to lose." Echo added one final note. "Empire channels are broadcasting. They're calling this the Ghost Strike. Some are saying a hidden fleet remains. Others believe a rebel cell pulled it off. None believe it was one ship." "Let them believe whatever they want," Rhys muttered, settling back into his seat. "As long as they're afraid." Because fear was the only language the Empire understood, and the Valkyrie had just become fluent. The damage to the Valkyrie was worse than Rhys had hoped, but not as bad as it could have been. The outer hull near the rear thrusters was scorched beyond recognition. The life support systems were working at barely 60%, and one of the stabilization gyros was fried entirely. The ship limped now, slow, stubborn, and full of fire. Lyra hovered over the engineering panel, her face streaked with sweat and grime. "We've got maybe 3 days of oxygen left unless we find a resupply station or a miracle." Rhys gave her a tired glance. "I've always preferred the miracle route. You and your death wishes." In the silence that followed, ECHO chimed in. "Incoming message. It's not encrypted." That got their attention. "Put it through," Rhys said, standing up straight. The main screen flickered to life. A grainy hologram formed, the silhouette of a tall alien, skin pale blue and eyes glowing with an artificial green hue. He wore the deep gold robes of the Imperial command circle. Someone high up, someone important. "Human," the voice rasped, more amused than angry. "You've done well." Lyra stiffened. "How the hell did they find us?" "They haven't," ECHO answered. "This is a wide broadcast, meant for us to pick up. No coordinates embedded, just bait." The hologram continued, unfazed. "Your destruction of the supply convoy has disrupted over a dozen planned occupations. Entire worlds will now remain in chaos longer than we predicted. That is unfortunate, but not irreparable." Rhys stared at the image, jaw clenched. "You act as if this act of sabotage will stop us," the alien said, voice smooth. "But you've only slowed the tide. A single ship, a single strike. It's nothing compared to the wave that follows." The screen cut to black, then silence again. "They're scared," Rhys said finally. Lyra looked at him like he'd lost it. "Scared?" That sounded like a threat. It was, but it was also a cover. He turned to ECHO. "Run a backtrace on the signal. Focus on secondary pulses, atmospheric warping, any residue from the transmission origin." "Working." Lyra frowned. "You think that broadcast was local?" "I think they want us to believe they're still in control, but when the Empire gets really angry, they don't send messages. They send death squads. That message? That was desperation dressed up in confidence." "Location found," ECHO announced. "Planetary body, designation, Iran Theta, a minor command post, likely where the transmission originated." Rhys smirked. "Then we're going to pay them a visit." "Are you insane?" Lyra snapped. "We barely made it out of the last fight alive." "This isn't about just fighting anymore," he said. "It's about momentum. Every hit we land, every crack we make, it adds up. You saw what happened. We didn't just destroy a convoy. We made them doubt. That's more dangerous than any weapon." Lyra looked at him for a long second, then nodded. "Then we'd better fix this ship before we try to crash the party." They spent the next 30 hours scavenging parts from the debris field. Rhys suited up twice, drifting into the frozen corpse of an Imperial carrier to steal energy cells and coolant tubes. Lyra rerouted half the ship's secondary systems to boost propulsion. Echo did what he could, coordinating repairs, balancing oxygen, running fake broadcasts to throw off scanners. And then, they were ready. Aeron Theta wasn't far. A small moon cloaked in an acid-green atmosphere, with defense platforms scattered like floating sentries. Not a fortress, just a backwater command node. But still dangerous. As they approached, ECHO broke the tension. "I've intercepted new communications. Empire intelligence believes the Valkyrie is now being piloted by a splinter faction of the old Earth Coalition." Lyra snorted. "They really think an entire faction could fly this death trap?" "They don't understand humans," Rhys muttered. "They never did." "We don't need factions. We just need a reason." They came in fast. The Valkyrie's hull still scarred, her engines whining, but she moved with purpose. At the edge of the moon's orbit, the defense grid lit up. "Shields?" Lyra asked. "Back up to 45%, Echo answered. "Enough for one pass, maybe." "That'll do," Rhys said. They dove into the firestorm, dodging blasts and return fire with the ease of old war dogs. At the heart of the moon's surface, nestled inside a jagged canyon, was a comms tower, a gleaming, tall spire wrapped in steel and pride. That's where the signal came from. That's what had to fall. "We'll never get a clean shot," Lyra shouted, pulling them into a spiral as enemy fire lit up the sky. "Then we don't aim for it," Rhys said. "We aim into it." "You mean, we crash?" Lyra blinked. "You're really serious this time." "Dead serious." And with that, he locked the course straight into the Empire's tower, because sometimes one broken ship could do more damage than a fleet. And this wasn't just a ship. It was a message. The Valkyrie screamed through the atmosphere like a falling god, wrapped in flame and fury. Wind resistance fought her every inch of the way down, but Rhys didn't flinch. Lyra's hands moved across the controls in a blur, redirecting what little auxiliary power remained to the forward thrusters, not to stop the crash, but to steer it. Ahead, the Empire's communication tower loomed like a steel needle plunged into the planet's skin. Around it, anti-air cannons fired wildly into the sky, but they were too slow, too blind to track something falling this fast. Echo's voice rang out, steady even in chaos. "Collision in 9 seconds. You are advised to brace. Estimated survival chance, 2.1%. Rhys just smiled. Still better odds than usual. The Valkyrie hit the surface like a meteor. The ground trembled. Fire erupted in a shockwave that shattered windows and knocked soldiers off their feet. Metal screamed as the nose of the ship buried itself deep into the tower's lower levels, tearing through structure and system like a knife through wet cloth. Alarms wailed. The sky went black with smoke. Inside the cockpit, everything went sideways. Sparks exploded from every panel. Rhys was thrown from his seat, his helmet cracking against the console. Lyra let out a scream, her restraints the only thing keeping her from smashing into the ceiling. Then, silence. Rhys coughed, pain radiating from his ribs. Blood dripped from his forehead, blurring his vision. Somewhere nearby, Echo's systems rebooted in stuttering sparks. Lyra groaned, still alive. "We... alive?" "Mostly," Rhys rasped, dragging himself upright. "But we don't have long." The ship was wedged into the tower, splitting the base open. Already he could hear the structure groaning, parts collapsing above and below. If they didn't move fast, the whole place would come down, and not the controlled way they'd planned. He grabbed the emergency pack and pulled Lyra to her feet. "Come on, we've got to finish it." They moved through the burning corridors of the tower, using the chaos to their advantage. Imperial officers shouted, scrambled, and fired wildly at shadows. The humans were ghosts, slipping through smoke, moving like vengeance made flesh. They reached the core chamber, where the comm systems were housed, shielded by high-density plating and guarded by an elite team of enforcers. Big, armored, genetically enhanced. They didn't see Rhys and Lyra coming. The Empire reacted like a wounded beast, fast, brutal, and desperate. Within hours of the Valkyries' attack on Eren Theta, the Empire initiated a full blackout across 20 outer systems. Communications were cut, ships were grounded, and surveillance networks scrambled to pin down the rogue human ship. They blamed a rebel coalition, a rogue AI faction, even internal sabotage. But none of it fit. Because it wasn't sabotage, it was war. And every citizen who watched Rhys's broadcast knew it. On the core worlds, panic simmered beneath the polished surface. Humans weren't supposed to be capable of this kind of precision, this kind of defiance. They were supposed to be extinct, or enslaved. That's what the history scrolls said. That's what the Empire had promised. But now? Now, a single broken ship had just torn down one of their central command nodes and broadcast a message of vengeance across half the known galaxy. In the back alleys of mining moons and slave colonies, whispers started to grow. They're still out there. The humans are fighting back. And they're winning. Inside the gutted remains of the Valkyrie, Rhys lay flat on his back, eyes shut, chest rising and falling slowly. Lyra sat beside him, applying a makeshift bandage to his ribs. "We should be dead," she muttered. "Yeah, but we're not," he replied, voice rough. Outside, the world was rubble. The tower had collapsed entirely, leaving behind a smoking crater and a wave of debris stretching for kilometers. The remaining fragments of the Valkyrie had acted like a bunker, just enough to shield them. "ECHO?" Lyra called. "Functional," the AI responded faintly, "though I have suffered significant data degradation. My neural pathways are fractured." Rhys gave a low chuckle. "Welcome to the club." They spent the next several hours trying to restore enough systems to get back into orbit. It was impossible. The Valkyrie wasn't flying again, not ever. But Echo had managed to ping a low-frequency emergency beacon. Maybe, if they were lucky, someone would answer. Or maybe they'd die on this dust ball. But luck had always been on humanity's side, even when it didn't make sense. 2 days later, a ship arrived. It wasn't Imperial. It wasn't marked. But it was human. The vessel was sleek, black, and modified far beyond standard Earth Coalition specs. It dropped into atmosphere like a shadow and landed a few hundred meters from the crater. For a moment, neither Rhys nor Lyra moved. Then the hatch opened. A woman stepped out, tall, with dark skin, silver streaks in her short hair, and eyes that scanned like lasers. She wore no insignia, no rank, but everything about her screamed authority. "Rhys Calder?" she called, voice sharp. He stood slowly, flinching from pain. "Who's asking?" "Captain Alara Mace, commanding officer of the Ghost Signal. We've been listening." Lyra stepped up beside him, wary. To what? Alara looked them both over, then smiled, not with joy, but with approval. To the sound of the Empire cracking. She walked forward, offering a hand. "Come with me. You've started something, Captain, and we're not about to let it die here." Aboard the Ghost Signal, Rhys and Lyra saw what they never expected to see again. A human fleet. Not large, not polished, but real. Scattered ships salvaged from old war relics, retrofitted mining freighters turned into gunboats, stealth crafts hacked together from stolen Imperial tech. A ghost fleet, one that had existed in the shadows for years, waiting for a moment. A symbol. Reese had become that symbol. Ilara showed them maps, plans, data cores full of Empire weaknesses they'd quietly collected. Supply chains vulnerable to disruption, unprotected outposts, propaganda systems waiting to collapse under a single powerful truth. "You didn't just attack a tower," Ilara said. "You lit the fuse. The Empire's afraid now. We have to push while they're off balance." Reese sat in silence for a long moment, watching a grainy image of the tower's collapse play on a flickering screen. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a man who had survived by luck, by anger, by pain, and yet something inside him stirred. It wasn't over. It was just beginning. He looked at Ilara. "So what's next?" Her grin turned sharp. "We go for their throat." In the shadows of the galaxy, the Empire began to bleed, and humanity, forgotten, scattered, underestimated, started to rise. The stars above were different now. Once they had shimmered with the cold, unshakable order of an empire. Lines of patrols, beacons of surveillance, the rigid light of control. But now, something new pulsed in the void. A disruption, a heartbeat. Humanity was no longer a ghost. They were fire. The ghost signal sat at the edge of the Valix belt, cloaked behind asteroid cover. Around her, more ships emerged, cobbled together, patched with desperation, but burning with purpose. They weren't a fleet in the traditional sense. They weren't meant to survive open war. They were meant to break things, to destroy the illusion of invincibility the Empire had worn like a crown. Reese stood on the bridge beside Ilara, armored up, expression carved from steel. Lyra was at the navigation array, fingers flying, her every movement a calculated strike. "This is it," Ilara said. "The final domino. Once we take the Regulus relay, we control the Empire's neural net for 6 core sectors: communications, logistics, security. We can cripple their coordination for months. And give every enslaved world a reason to rise," Reese said quietly. Ilara nodded. "Exactly." Reese turned to the comms officer. "Patch me through." A moment later, every ship in the scattered human armada heard his voice. "This is Reese Calder. Some of you don't know me. Some of you think I'm just lucky. Maybe I am. But today isn't about me. It's about the lie we've lived under for a century. The one that said we were beaten, that humans were weak, that resistance was suicide." He paused, letting the words hang. "Well, they were wrong. We're not ghosts. We're not slaves. We are human beings, and we are done running." The comms fell silent after that, but only for a moment. Then came the replies, one after another, from every ship, every captain, every survivor. "We're with you. For Earth. For vengeance. For freedom." The fleet moved. The assault on the Regulus relay wasn't clean. It wasn't surgical. It was chaos wrapped in noise and fury. The Empire's defense grid opened fire the moment the fleet dropped cloak. Energy beams tore through asteroid fragments. Missiles screamed across space. But the humans didn't stop. They couldn't stop. Because behind them, hope waited. Inside the relay station, elite guards mobilized, expecting a typical enemy. They were met instead by Reese and his team, dropping from orbit in re-entry pods, crashing through armor plating like spears from heaven. Reese hit the ground hard and running. His rifle spat fire. His team fanned out, carving a path through the chaos. Lyra broke into the command node with ECHO guiding her. The AI, now fully restored and more aggressive than ever, flooded the relay's systems like a virus with teeth. "Uploading now," Echo said coldly. Prepare for widespread signal disruption in 3, 2. The lights across the Empire's communication grid died. Screens went blank. Orders were lost. Ships drifted without command. And across 100 worlds, the shackles of centralized control snapped. But the Empire didn't fall silent. They screamed. Fleets scrambled. Officers panicked. Propaganda ministers issued denial after denial. But it didn't matter. Because everywhere, on every channel, Reese's message played again. Looped, repeated, unfiltered. We are done running. The image of a lone human ship tearing down a command tower became myth in real time. On colony worlds, slaves picked up tools and turned them into weapons. On prison planets, inmates overran guards. Even within the Empire's own core, a new fire took root. Fear. Of humans. Of what they might become. Hours later, aboard the Ghost signal, Reese stood in the observation bay, staring at the relay station now dark and quiet in orbit. Lyra approached, bruised and bandaged. It's done. He nodded slowly. For now. You think they'll strike back? She asked. They'll try, he said. But they're bleeding, and they know it. She leaned on the railing beside him. What do we do now? Reese didn't answer right away. He looked at the stars, once so cold, now burning with possibility. We build something better, or we burn the whole damn galaxy down trying. In the weeks that followed, the ripple became a wave. Worlds declared independence, uprisings surged, human enclaves emerged from hiding. Reese Calder's name became legend, equal parts hero and ghost. The Empire, once too vast to challenge, was now just another enemy that bled. And in the heart of that fire, one truth rang louder than all others. Humanity had returned. Not as servants, not as slaves, but as the species the galaxy had always feared they would become. Unbreakable, relentless, free. They called it a diplomatic punishment. That's what the Galactic Council named the sanctions, the embargoes, and the public trial Earth was forced to attend. Every representative from every advanced alien species sat in that massive obsidian chamber on Jarthul Prime, passing judgment on humanity like they were some backwater criminals. For what? For fighting back. 1 year before the trial, Earth had defended itself from a mining operation illegally set up by the Tavari Empire, a smug, tentacle-faced race that believed lesser species should be grateful for being exploited. Their machines had begun drilling into the Mariana Trench without warning. No communication, no agreement, nothing. Just giant alien rigs cracking the Earth open like a nut. At first, humans sent warnings, then envoys. Then came the explosions. 3 rigs destroyed, 37 Tavari casualties. And suddenly Earth was branded aggressive, uncivilized, and a threat to galactic peace. In the months that followed, food shipments stopped. Trade partners disappeared. Earth's satellites were accidentally knocked from orbit by cosmic debris. And then came the biggest humiliation, the forced attendance at the Galactic Council's judgment seat. Ambassador Naomi Ressa stood before them, the only human allowed inside the trial chamber. A slim woman with tired eyes and skin the color of rich mahogany, she looked far too human compared to the elegant, glowing forms and hulking beasts that surrounded her in the circle. "You are a violent species," hissed Chancellor Axarith, a floating crystalline being from the Zeln Consortium. His voice echoed unnaturally, like a bell rung underwater. "You are not yet ready for higher civility. Your world shall be contained." Naomi's jaw clenched. Her hands, hidden in her robe, curled into fists. She wasn't angry for herself. She was angry for the children in Nairobi who had no grain delivery that month. For the scientists in Luna's research dome who lost power when their solar arrays were sabotaged. For the millions on Earth living under the weight of fear, starvation, and silence. Still, she bowed. "We understand your verdict," she said. "No, you don't," whispered a voice behind her. It came from General Vakor of the Trinlai, one of the Council's military arms. He grinned with tusks showing. "But you will." Earth left that trial humiliated, stripped of trade rights, surrounded by patrol fleets, no ships in, no ships out, and worst of all, broadcast across every civilized planet as a cautionary tale. That was the moment humanity stopped pleading. They started planning. In the bunkers beneath Geneva, in the cyber labs of Seoul, in the deep silence of the Martian colonies, they gathered. Not governments, not politicians, but leaders, fighters, survivors, people with nothing left to lose and everything to take back. One of them was Elias Ward, ex-Special Ops, now labeled a terrorist by the Intergalactic Council. He had one eye, a half-mechanical spine, and a reputation for breaking bones before asking questions. He'd watched his sister die when a council blockade kept her cancer meds from arriving. "You don't keep beating a dog and expect it to stay loyal," he said during the first meeting. "Eventually it bites, and humans, we bite hard." They called their operation Black Ember, not a war, not a rebellion, a reckoning. Quietly, they began hijacking council drones, spoofing communications, gathering intelligence, rebuilding old weapons the council had banned after humanity's induction into galactic society. Then they started vanishing. Freighters, research ships, scavengers, slipping into the asteroid belts where council eyes couldn't see. Naomi was part of it too, publicly still an ambassador. Privately, she was the voice of vengeance. "You made humanity kneel," she whispered during one transmission. "Now we rise, and you will remember us not as beggars, but as the storm you never saw coming." It wasn't about winning anymore. It was about making them pay. One act of cruelty at a time, the Council had chipped away at humanity's pride, their unity, their hope. And now they had nothing left but rage. The kind of rage that made stars go dark. Space was cold, but rage burned hotter. In the silence beyond Saturn's rings, 3 stolen Tevari scout ships hovered in formation. Painted matte black, their heat signatures were disguised with old Terran stealth tech, the kind outlawed centuries ago. Inside the lead ship, Elias Ward paced like a caged animal. "Are we clear on orbital paths?" he asked, eyes scanning a rotating 3D hologram of the target, a council communication relay perched on a rogue moon. It was a critical hub for interstellar traffic between the inner systems. Disabling it wouldn't just blind the council, it would make a statement. "We're synced," replied Lynn Tanaka from the helm. She was young, barely 25, with augmented neural ports lining her neck like silver rings. Born post-blockade, she'd never seen Earth without hunger. 10 seconds to breach window." Elias nodded. "No survivors. Leave the wreckage floating." Nobody flinched. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were reminders that every kick the council landed came with consequences now. The first explosion came like a heartbeat, silent, then screaming red across the void. The relay's shield dome shattered under the impact of a kinetic torpedo. Then came the rail fire, slicing through metal and flesh with equal indifference. Alarms blared in alien tongues. The station's defense drones scrambled, but humanity had learned. They jammed them, turned their own code against them. Inside the station, screams cut short as gravity systems collapsed. Oxygen vented into space. Bodies, council workers, mostly Arctai and Jarvan, floated like trash, still twitching. Lynn's voice was calm. "Relay neutralized. Council blackout across 4 sectors." "Broadcast the message," Elias growled. She tapped the console. Across thousands of planets, from core worlds to the edge colonies, holoscreens flickered. A single message appeared in every known language. Humanity does not forget. Humanity does not forgive. This is only the beginning. Panic followed. Council newsnets tried to cover it up, but the footage leaked. Soldiers with Terran features, voice logs in English, the unmistakable brutality of Earthborn anger. On Jar Thol Prime, the Council convened in chaos. "This is terrorism," spat Chancellor Axareth, his crystalline body pulsating erratically. "It's an act of war," thundered Vakor, pounding the table. "They were supposed to be under control," another shouted. But Naomi Reza was calm. She watched from the shadows of Earth's silent seat, still exiled, still voiceless, but no longer powerless. "They're not under control anymore," she said quietly. "You made sure of that." Meanwhile, back on Earth, things were changing. The blockades still floated in orbit, but fewer now. Council ships had started disappearing, their crews never found. Satellites were blinking offline one by one. The sky wasn't safe for them anymore. And in the underground cities, built after food riots turned violent, a new mood had taken root. It wasn't despair, it was fury. People no longer whispered. They trained. They built weapons out of scraps. Kids barely 10 were learning how to jam scanners and disassemble plasma rifles. One girl, Amira Kale, was already known among rebels as the Shadow of Nairobi. At 12, she hacked a council transport security grid and rerouted it straight into a mountain. No survivors. She didn't smile when she did it. She just asked if it had food on board, and when they said yes, she told them to gather every crumb before the council could retaliate. There was no innocence left. Only survival. Only retribution. And far away, at the edge of known space, a massive ship was being built. Hidden inside a hollowed-out asteroid, powered by a stolen quantum core, the resurgence was unlike anything humanity had fielded before. It wasn't sleek, it wasn't pretty. It was a blunt instrument, a ship built to smash through fleets and send a message in wreckage and fire. Elias Ward watched its construction with grim pride. "It's almost time," Lynn said beside him. He nodded. "They've lived with peace too long. They forgot what we are." "What are we?" He turned, face half in shadow. "We're the species that invented war before language. We loved it, mastered it, buried it under false peace until they dug it back up." He paused, staring into the darkness of space. "Now we'll remind them." The Galactic Council, once a symbol of interstellar order, was unraveling thread by thread. Panic wasn't something they were used to. Their rule was founded on cold logic, ancient treaties, and superiority complexes built over millennia. But none of that mattered when communication lines went dark and outposts turned to ash. They had labeled Earth as primitive, undisciplined, predictable. And now, they didn't know what Earth would do next. Meetings ran around the clock in Jar Thol Prime. Military fleets were redeployed, trade convoys rerouted, border worlds braced for attacks from the shadows. Everywhere, whispers of the Terrans spread like wildfire. Some feared them, others admired them, and a few began questioning the Council's righteousness altogether. Back on the dark side of Jupiter's moon Callisto, hidden beneath its icy crust, Elias Ward stood over a table surrounded by holomaps and war schematics. Around him were rebels, defectors, rogue AI tacticians, and even a few non-human allies who had grown disillusioned with the Council's lies. One of them, a four-armed Drexian named Varlock, spoke in a guttural snarl. "The Council's grip is weakening. Already 3 systems refuse to enforce the embargo. If we strike a major core world now, it will break their illusion of control." Elias grinned without humor. "That's the idea." "But which target?" Lynn asked, eyes scanning planetary coordinates. We could hit something symbolic, like the Academy of Galactic Peace on Lyros, or something strategic, like the drone foundries orbiting Erix 3. No, Elias said. We hit their pride. He tapped the holoscreen, bringing up the rotating image of Solaris, a glittering city world considered the jewel of the Council's civilization. Rich, untouchable. Entire generations of nobles, diplomats, and strategists called it home. It was protected by orbital cannons, defense grids, and an elite security fleet. To most, it was suicide. To Elias, it was the point. We infiltrate, we sabotage their systems from within, and then we make their skies burn, he said. Let them know that even their safest nest isn't beyond Earth's reach. The plan was madness, impossible even, which made it perfect. A month later, the operation was underway. Lynn, disguised as a cybernetic trade envoy, infiltrated Solaris under a forged identity. Var Locke posed as her security escort. Inside the city world's gleaming towers, luxury blinded the eyes. The people there still believed in the Council's version of reality, that humanity was a pest being disciplined, that rebels were just terrorists, that the system was eternal. But those illusions shattered when the power grid failed. The moment the lights died, panic set in, elevators froze, gravity destabilized, automated drones turned on their handlers. Across the main broadcasting towers, Naomi's voice cut through the darkness like a blade. We are not terrorists. We are your reflection. This is the pain we endured. You just didn't feel it, until now. Then the sky turned red. The resurgence arrived through a cloaked slipstream, breaching Solaris's orbital defenses with terrifying speed. No negotiations, no demands, just thunder and vengeance. The first barrage shattered the planetary shield array. The second ripped into the spaceports. Fire rained across towers that had never seen war. Council guards scrambled. Civilians screamed. But it was too late. Elias led the ground assault himself, boots stomping over marble walkways stained with smoke and blood. He wasn't here to conquer. He was here to remind them. One council envoy begged at his feet. Please, please, there are children here. Families. We're not all like them. Elias looked down, eyes cold. Neither were we. He walked away as the detonations echoed behind him. The resurgence pulled out hours later, leaving Solaris crippled. The city's once proud spires were twisted ruins, its rich elites reduced to dust or dragging the wounded through rubble. The message was clear. Nowhere is safe. Back on Earth, crowds gathered around makeshift screens in underground cities. When they saw the fire consuming Solaris, they didn't cheer. They didn't cry. They watched in silence. Not because they were heartless, but because this was justice, and they weren't done. The retaliation came fast, brutal, precise. Within days of the Solaris attack, the Council unleashed the Purge Protocols, an ancient, rarely used order meant to cleanse rebellious civilizations before they infected others with defiance. No trial, no diplomacy, just annihilation. Their first target wasn't Earth. It was Mars. The Council believed they'd break humanity by attacking its colonies first, cripple the support, demoralize the resistance. But they didn't know what Mars had become during the blockade. The Red Planet had learned to live on scraps, built cities underground, raised children under artificial skies, and taught them that survival was not a privilege. It was a war. When the orbital bombardment began, they were ready. The Council's dreadnoughts approached with confidence, hurling plasma strikes that vaporized old mining rigs and glassed portions of the Martian crust. But under the surface, buried deeper than even their sensors could detect, were the Ash Wolves, human strike teams that had trained in the dark for this very moment. Captain Aria Devlin led them. She was born on Mars, had never set foot on Earth. Her skin bore radiation burns, and her lungs required filter implants. But her heart? Pure iron. She watched the Council's ships hammer her planet. Then she gave the signal. Within minutes, camouflaged railguns emerged from the crater canyons, locking on and firing with terrifying precision. Human-made fusion torpedoes, cobbled together from illegal tech and smuggled black market parts, burst from hidden silos and found their targets. One dreadnought exploded mid-orbit, its shattered hull raining into the Martian sky like burning confetti. Then the real counterattack began. Mars launched its own fleet, small, fast ships, mostly reprogrammed mining haulers armed with plasma cutters and hacking arrays. They slipped past the chaos, boarded enemy vessels, and turned their own systems against them. By the end of the second day, 3 Council vessels were lost. But the cost was devastating. Entire Martian cities had been leveled, families gone in a blink. The dust storms carried screams and ash across what remained. In one sector, a child was found sitting alone beside a collapsed shelter, his eyes staring at the sky that had tried to kill him. When asked his name, he just said, "I'm Rage now." That became a rallying cry. We're Rage now. Earth heard it. The colonies heard it. Even the rebels hiding in fringe systems repeated it in hushed tones like a sacred vow. Meanwhile, the Council was unraveling faster than it could control. Worlds once loyal started asking hard questions. Why had they lied about Earth's rebellion? Why were so many resources being poured into suppressing a species that, by all rights, should have been crushed a century ago? Why did so many of their own die, while the humans just kept coming back stronger? Some races, quietly, secretly, began supplying Earth with intel. A few even offered weapons. Others defected outright. And through it all, Naomi Reza kept working. Still branded an exile, she operated from the shadows, feeding intelligence to Elias and the Resistance Network. But now, something more dangerous stirred inside her. She had contacts on the inside, allies who knew about the Council's darkest secret, a plan they had developed centuries ago, a final failsafe, the erasure device, a weapon that didn't destroy a planet but erased it, atom by atom, memory by memory. Nothing left, not even history. It had only ever been theoretical. Until now. She uncovered transmissions that confirmed the Council had activated its deployment process. They intended to use it on Earth, to remove the problem completely, like humanity had never existed at all. Naomi stared at the blinking message on her screen. Coordinates, timelines, activation codes. "This is it," she whispered. The Council wasn't trying to win anymore. They were trying to erase the evidence of their failure. But humanity had a final card to play. Not diplomacy, not defense. A counterstrike so vicious, so unforgettable, that no species, no matter how arrogant, would ever think of crossing them again. Naomi called Elias. "We need to launch everything," she said. "Not just ships, not just bombs." He didn't ask why. He already knew. "Time to give them the one thing they fear most," he said. "What's that?" He smiled, eyes burning with fury. "Human history." It was called the Vault. Buried deep beneath the ice oceans of Virex 7, the Galactic Council's most classified installation sat like a dormant god, silent, invisible, and deadly. No records of it existed in public databases. Only the highest-ranking Council species even knew it was real. It was here that the erasure device was stored, under biolock, time-gated encryption, and a kill switch capable of destroying half the star system if anyone tried to force entry. And now, a team of humans was about to break in. Elias Ward stood in the dim light of the Phantom Wraith, a prototype stealth ship so advanced it shouldn't have existed. It was powered by stolen Tavari Matterfold drives and shielded by tech reverse-engineered from the Council's own cloaking arrays. A small crew of 20 sat ready, each one handpicked from the most lethal corners of Earth's rebellion. No ceremony, no speeches, just quiet resolve. Lynn adjusted her gear, double-checked the fusion blades on her hips, and looked over at Elias. Even if we get inside, we can't just disable it. They'll rebuild somewhere else. Elias didn't look at her. That's why we don't disable it. She blinked. You mean, we set it off, he said, voice calm. Here, on Virex 7, let it wipe itself out. The Council loses its trump card and a big piece of its soul. There was silence, and then, one by one, the crew nodded. They understood. It was suicide. But humanity wasn't afraid to die anymore. Not if it meant making history that couldn't be erased. The Phantom Wraith slipped past the outer planetary defenses like smoke. Inside the vault's perimeter, drones hovered silently beneath the waves, scanning for signs of life. But the human ship deployed organic decoys, genetically engineered aquatic beasts that drew attention just long enough for the real team to breach. Elias, Lynn, and Varlock led the infiltration. The interior of the vault was a twisted marvel, alien metals fused with pulsating neural wiring like a living organism wrapped in concrete. At its heart, the erasure device sat on a raised platform suspended in magnetic stasis. It looked like a frozen star, bright, humming with power, and impossibly beautiful. And surrounding it, rows of cryopods. Each one held Council scientists in deep stasis, witnesses, custodians of oblivion. Do we kill them? Lynn asked, already drawing her weapon. No, Elias said, pulling a data drive from his pack. We let them wake up. We want them to watch. He connected the drive to the erasure core. Naomi had embedded a virus, coded in human memory patterns, that would not only trigger the device's implosion, but also embed every Council system with the message. You erased our rights, our homes, our future. Now watch us erase your gods. As the countdown began, alarms flared across the vault. The scientists stirred. Defensive turrets dropped from the ceiling. Sirens screamed in 16 languages, but it was already too late. The humans had uploaded the virus and activated the failsafe. The vault was now a bomb. Elias turned to the team. Extraction route Omega. Go they ran, dodging plasma bursts and collapsing tunnels. The vault's AI was going into meltdown, trying to override the erasure trigger, but Naomi's code held firm. In 30 minutes, it would all be gone. As they reached the ocean's edge, the Phantom Wraith rose to meet them, scorched, half-damaged, but alive. They escaped just as the vault imploded. It wasn't an explosion. It was absence. The entire installation folded inward, then vanished. No debris, no radiation, just silence. All across the galaxy, Council command channels erupted in panic. Their mightiest weapon, gone. Their records of control, their data on Earth's rebellion, their long list of classified threats, wiped clean with it. They tried to cover it up. But it was too late. Within days, resistance movements rose on a dozen Council-aligned worlds. The illusion of the Council's invincibility had cracked. And for the first time in centuries, their enemies weren't afraid. They were angry and united. The Council had always believed in control. Not peace, control. Their entire empire ran on the illusion that order came from obedience, that fear bred stability, and that rebellion could be erased with overwhelming force and a few censored histories. But when the vault vanished, when their own device was used against them, something far more dangerous than rebellion ignited across the stars. Inspiration. It started with the rim worlds. Systems that had been taxed, policed, and silenced for centuries rose overnight. The mining colonies on Velar 9 seized their overseers. On Talax Prime, workers dismantled the Council's propaganda towers and replaced them with crude flags bearing the words, "Never again." Then came defections. Ships abandoned their posts. Captains disobeyed direct orders. Whole planetary militias once loyal to the Council broadcast messages of support to Earth. The Galactic Council, in desperation, enacted the Unity Protocol, a last-ditch effort to preserve their dominance by forcing all remaining member worlds into a single warfront. One banner, one army, one goal: the total destruction of Earth and any species aligned with it. They named it Operation Final Dusk. The largest fleet in galactic history began moving. A wall of warships, dreadnoughts, troop barges, and planet killers stretching across systems. It would take weeks to reach Earth's orbit. Elias Ward didn't wait. In a hidden bunker beneath old Chicago, now a fortress of data and steel, he stared at the holograms of the approaching fleet. Thousands of blinking icons, each representing death. "This is it," Naomi said quietly beside him. "We've poked the dragon too many times. Now it's awake." Elias shook his head. "Number, this isn't a dragon. Dragons have pride. This question mark. This is a dying god clawing at its tomb." They had only days to prepare. Earth's surface defenses were still patchwork. Missile platforms, cloaked railguns, EMP towers, most of it built from salvaged Council tech. But Elias had one thing they didn't: unity. He called in every favor, every ally. Ships from the Martian Resistance, stealth bombers from the Saturn Syndicate, pirate crews from the Andromeda Expanse. Even a few Tavari engineers, once enemies, arrived with experimental plasma cores to supercharge Earth's grid. They weren't just defending Earth. They were defending the idea of resistance itself. As the Council fleet crossed Neptune's orbit, human ships rose to meet them. The sky turned into a battlefield of gods. Explosions lit up the void. Hulls cracked. Pilots screamed. But for every human ship destroyed, 2 more flanked behind it with righteous fury. Elias led from the resurgence, now upgraded, scarred, and more dangerous than ever. Varlock manned the main cannon, while Naomi coordinated the defense nets from an orbital station. Then came the turning point. The Council flagship, Judgment's Reach, emerged from hyperspace, 3 miles long, armed with a singularity core. It unleashed a gravitational blast that tore through human lines, swallowing 6 ships in a second. But Earth was waiting. The old space station on Luna, once thought defunct, activated. Its core, powered by a stolen Council AI Naomi had reprogrammed herself, unleashed a counterwave of anti-gravity that destabilized the Judgment's Reach. In that split second of chaos, Elias ordered every remaining bomber to strike. They didn't hesitate. Humanity's wrath poured into the Council's greatest warship in the form of nuclear fire, kinetic rods, and code virus torpedoes that melted its internal AI. It cracked in half. Then burned. Across the Council's command lines, silence. The unthinkable had happened. Their strongest ship destroyed by humans. Panic rippled through their fleets. Confusion, infighting, and then retreat. The Grand Fleet turned, broken. Not by overwhelming force, but by sheer will. Humanity didn't win because it was stronger. It won because it was angrier, because it refused to go extinct quietly, because it remembered every lie, every scar, and every forgotten scream. In the smoking aftermath of the largest space battle in recorded history, Earth should have had a moment to breathe. But peace wasn't waiting in the shadows. Revenge was. The Council's defeat over Earth didn't unite the galaxy. It shattered it. Within days of the retreat, the once mighty Galactic Council fractured into factions. Some begged for negotiation, seeing Earth's strength and public sympathy as a sign to reform. Others, the old bloods, refused to bow. These were the ancient species, the ones who had built the Council from chains and conquest. Their pride had been too deeply wounded. To them, Earth wasn't a threat. It was a stain that had to be scrubbed from history. And they had one last play. A shadow general known only as Koth Zerun stepped from exile. Thought dead after the border purges centuries ago, he had returned with a fleet of mercenaries, ex-council enforcers, and planetary assassins loyal only to him. He didn't want to restore the council. He wanted to end humanity, person by person, planet by planet. Elias learned of him too late. Koth's forces struck the outer colonies first, burning human settlements in deep space, assassinating diplomats, planting propaganda across the networks. He called his campaign the Correction. And unlike the Council, Koth didn't care about war laws or rules of engagement. He wanted fear. One of his first messages was a broadcast on all human frequencies. The screen flickered, static cracking. Then the face of an old reptilian warlord appeared, his skin like dried bone, his eyes black and bottomless. You think you've won, but your victory is an ember in a forest fire. I have no council, no masters. I answer to vengeance, and I will teach you, humans, that rage burns brightest just before extinction. He ended the message by executing a group of captured Martian scouts on screen. Slow, cruel, just to send a message. Elias felt that message like a blade through his chest. Naomi responded with silence. But behind the silence, she was building something terrifying. It wasn't a weapon. It was a virus. Not one for machines, but for minds. She called it Project Lazarus. Built from fragments of council tech and raw human emotion, it was designed to infect Koth's command structure, not through code, but through story, memory, symbols. It spread through visuals, through old war recordings of Earth's survival, through whispers on interstellar channels. It was a digital ghost that reminded even Koth's soldiers what humans had survived, what they'd done to win. And worse, it made some of them question their orders. While Naomi fought in silence, Elias prepared Earth for a second siege. Only this time, the war wasn't coming in neat fleets or predictable patterns. Koth's attacks were random. Guerrilla, dirty, he used suicide pods, sleeper agents, plasma bombs in refugee ships. When he struck Earth, he didn't use dreadnoughts. He used memory leeches, devices that burned out the history archives in major cities, deleting human records, erasing family trees, even war logs from the Great Battle. It wasn't about killing humans anymore. It was about erasing what made them human. In one assault, an entire museum in New Tokyo was wiped clean. Paintings gone, voices gone, names gone. But one janitor, an old man named Yuto, survived. When Elias found him sitting among the ashes, still clutching a scorched datapad, he asked him why he hadn't left. Yuto simply said, "If they erase the stories, they erase us." I stayed to remember. Elias took his words and made them a banner. "We stay to remember." He painted it on ships, uploaded it into firewalls, embedded it in code. And humanity, tired, bleeding but unbroken, began fighting back again. Not just with guns, but with memory, with art, with defiance. It began with silence. Not the comforting silence of peace, but the sharp, cold quiet of anticipation, like the breath just before a scream. Koth Zerun had come to finish what the Council could not. He descended upon Earth with his Nightborn armada, a fleet made from the bones of conquered ships, each vessel radiating stolen energy from obliterated civilizations. No rules, no broadcasts, no demands, just death. He didn't seek surrender. He sought extinction, but he miscalculated. He thought humanity would fight like before, with desperation, grit, and outdated weapons fueled by vengeance. He expected stubborn survivors, cornered and angry. He didn't expect Earth to evolve. Elias Ward stood on the command deck of the Resurgence, not in armor but in black. mourning, not for what had been lost, but for what they were about to become. Behind him stood Varlock, scarred and unshaken, and Naomi, who had long since stopped smiling. They weren't fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting to become unchainable. Naomi's virus, Project Lazarus, had reached its final stage. No longer just infecting systems, it was now embedded in the minds of soldiers, rebels, civilians across the galaxy. It carried memories of Earth's fall, its rise, its fury, and it passed from being to being like wildfire. It didn't kill. It woke people up. When Koth's ships entered Earth's orbit, expecting a fractured world, they found a unified defense grid channeling energy from every colony. Mars sent kinetic warheads. Europa fired plasma spears. Titan, once silent, erupted with electromagnetic javelins that pierced Koth's cruisers. But that was just the prelude. Elias activated the final phase of Naomi's plan. The Mirror Core. It wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a psychological AI that reflected back every command Koth gave, twisting his own orders into doubt among his troops. Soldiers began hearing alternate commands. Ships were split between conflicting directives. Chaos took root. Inside the Nightborn Armada, captains fought each other, unsure who truly led. Koth's fury echoed across all channels. "You mock war with tricks and riddles. Come face me like a soldier," Elias answered. The resurgence broke through Koth's line, flanked by retrofitted rebel cruisers and drones controlled by children on Earth who had grown up learning war like math. They didn't fire first. They let Koth come. His flagship, the Bleeding Maw, locked onto the resurgence, one final duel. But Elias didn't fire a single shot. Instead, he opened a channel and played Yuto's recording. The old janitor, his voice rough, trembling, speaking over ashes. "You can kill a man, burn a home, erase a name, but you cannot destroy memory. You cannot end what refuses to forget." And then Elias spoke, quiet but unflinching. "We don't need to win, Koth. We just need to make sure you're remembered as the last tyrant. And we? The last species you underestimated." Naomi hit execute. The virus spread, not into ships, but into Koth's personal neural core. The AI assistant in his own brain, once loyal, began replaying every atrocity, every scream, every erased world he had destroyed. Koth screamed as he lost control of his own mind. His ship powered down, and Earth, without mercy, opened fire. The Bleeding Maw exploded into a silent, brilliant storm of white light. The war was over. Not because the enemy had surrendered, but because they no longer had the will to fight. Years later, statues would be raised, not just of Elias, Naomi, or the fallen, but of children who coded defenses from bunkers, of elders who taught history under bombardment, of the nameless who kept stories alive. Humanity wasn't remembered for its violence. It was remembered for its rage. Unbreakable, righteous, and pure. When the Galactic Council tried to erase Earth from the stars, humanity didn't just fight back. It rewrote the ending and made sure everyone remembered forever.